Welcome into a new week of people, power, and politics as we inch ever closer to picking a new president. It's getting down to the wire now. I'm Roop Raj. Buckle up because you're about to see even more of those political ads, making even more claims. Some are true, others not so much. But that's why we are here each and every night to make sure you get the facts you need before you head into the voting booth. And we fact check the red and the blue. And that's the bottom line of this show. And in that spirit, we're doing a reality check on an ad that's been getting a lot of play over the last month. It has to do with sex changes for prisoners. While there is truth to the ad, it's a little more complicated and more nuanced than the ad portrays. And there's a fact in here that the Trump administration and the Trump campaign may not love that we're going to bring up. We'll tell you what that is coming up in just a second here. And a report about Michigan's voter rolls being overinflated has Republicans once again questioning if this year's election will be fair. We're talking to a Republican strategist, Jason Cable-Rowe, about that. And we're also talking to the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. What gives? We'll get to the bottom of it on this program. And as we talk about the election, tomorrow is Tuesday. That'll mark 2 weeks until Election Day. Early voting kicked off in Detroit this weekend. And many of you also voted absentee, but there are some important dates for you to keep in mind as we approach that day. So pull up that calendar app on your phone and start plugging away. Here's the big message from election officials. You shouldn't chance it by returning your absentee ballot by mail. You have a lot of other options. It needs to be at your clerk's office in order for this to count by 8 o'clock on Election Day. So if you can, the Secretary of State's office says you should put it in a secure drop box located in your community, turn it in at your clerk's office or at an early voting site. Take it to your precinct on Election Day. That's another option. So you have a lot of things that you can do to make sure this gets in. And then this Saturday is when all communities need to provide early voting. We told you some communities like Detroit already started early voting, but that period runs through November 3rd. So that's the good news. You have some time. Finally, 8 p.m. on Election Day is when polls close and absentee ballots are due. But a good reminder here, if you're in line by 8 o'clock on Election Day, you will be allowed to vote even if your ballot is cast at 8:15 or 8:20 or whenever, as long as you are in the line at 8 p.m. But this countdown to Election Day got us wondering, how tired are you of political ads? Let's face it, you can't watch a football game, your favorite show, heck, even this show, hopefully one of your favorite shows, without seeing a campaign commercial or maybe 20 of them. So we asked you to rate your fatigue on a scale of 1 to 10. Take a look.
10. I absolutely hate them. Hate them. They're a big inconvenience to my everyday life. You know, I'm just like chilling at home and they're talking about all this crazy stuff.
Probably a 12.
You hate them?
I hate them.
How come?
It's annoying.
10.
10? How come?
Because we don't know what's authentic and what's not.
12. I hate them. They're horrible. They're just like annoying and repetitive.
10.
10? How come?
Yes. How come? Because I think they really take people for stupid.
Oh, hate them.
Hate them?
Yeah, 12.
1 to 10.
Oh, 10.
25.
What was that?
25.
Sick of it.
I'm sorry, what?
Sick of political ads, yes.
How about you?
Oh, I love the creativity.
You're the only one.
That's pretty funny. Hey, we found one guy who likes him. We're also doing a pulse check on fox2detroit.com. If you want to vote, just scan that QR code on your screen to weigh in. So far, most of you say you're very sick of them, and it's not even close. More than 300 votes for that one in just a few short hours. The rest of the scale has fewer than 15, and that's just interesting. I mean, this thing's just peaking. People are saying 25, 30. All right, well, we're almost done. Stick with us through this. Hitting the campaign trail, Vice President Harris was back in Metro Detroit today for a roundtable event out in Royal Oak. She and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney answered questions by voters at an event moderated by former NBC News anchor Maria Shriver. Harris spoke once again about the gun control issue, saying while she supports the Second Amendment, there needs to be more done to prevent mass shootings, adding children shouldn't have to go to school fearing for their lives.
Our kids are growing up where they are learning that they may be unsafe in the classroom, where they should be absorbing the wonders of the world. One kid said to me, we were talking about this, and said to me, yeah, that's why I don't like going to fifth period. I said, why, sweetheart? Why don't you like going to fifth period? Because in that classroom, there's no closet in which to hide. So when we think of this issue, we must also consider the trauma, that is, the trauma of the direct trauma for those who have been directly affected by gun violence, including that to our kids who are in schools across our country doing this, not to mention their teachers who want to teach and not also have to worry about, will they be able to physically protect a child from a bullet?
Now, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney was the former co-chair of the January 6th committee. She also voted to impeach the former president because of the Capitol riot. She says this election is about two very simple things.
I think that we are facing a choice in this election. It's not about party. It's about right and wrong. And I certainly have many Republicans who will say to me, I can't be public. They do worry about a whole range of things, including violence, but they'll do the right thing. And I would just remind people, if you're at all concerned, you can vote your conscience and not ever have to say a word to anybody. And there will be millions of Republicans who do that on November 5th.
All right, we know this won't be the only visit Vice President Harris will be making in Michigan this week. She'll be back here Saturday for the first day of the mandatory early voting period with former First Lady Michelle Obama. We'll let you know when we get the specifics about that visit. We also know Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance will be in Waterford later this week. The Ohio senator will speak at a rally at Elite Jet Center on Thursday evening. That event starts at 6 o'clock. Vance's running mate, former President Donald Trump, was in another swing state today, North Carolina. He also characterized the race as a choice, but put it a little more colorfully than former Congresswoman Cheney. Take a listen.
This election is a choice between whether we will have think of this, 4 more years. Could you stand it? It's 4 more years of incompetence and stupidity and failure and disaster, or whether we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. I think we have a real chance.
The former president will be in North Carolina again tomorrow before visiting Georgia on Wednesday and then Las Vegas on Thursday. All right, we talked off the top of the show about how political ads dominate our television screens as we inch closer to the election. And we always say some of them stretch the truth. Others are outright falsehoods. And some lack important context, which is the case in this ad.
Supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
All right, we say it every time we do a reality check on this show. We protect facts, not candidates. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are not perfect, nor are their political parties. And we're going to fact check both of them. PolitiFact, the nonpartisan fact-checking site run by the Poynter Institute, did rate that claim as mostly true. The question came up again during Harris's interview with Bret Baier on Fox News last week.
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
Now, here's the deal. According to PolitiFact, that claim is true as well. See, this goes back to 2019 when Harris said during her primary run for president she'd support access for gender-affirming care, including for federal detainees. But she hasn't campaigned on that this time around. Now, federal law requires inmates have access to necessary medical care, and courts have ruled that this can include medically necessary gender-affirming care and surgery. That was something the Federal Bureau of Prisons under the Trump administration acknowledged as well. In fact, just 2 federal prisoners have successfully had these surgeries, both after long legal challenges. And PolitiFact couldn't find any record of immigration detainees getting these surgeries. Now, again, we fact-check both sides unapologetically on the show. That's what we're about here on The Pulse, making sure you get the truth. And we will keep doing that as we roll through this election and beyond here on The Pulse. By the way, The Pulse will continue well after November 5th. And if you see something on TV or online and you're kind of scratching your head saying, wait, is this real or not? You want us to do a reality check? Hit us up. We are working for you. Send an email to Fox 2 News Desk at foxtv.com. or just scan the QR code on your screen. That's the easiest thing to do. And just scan that and it'll get right to your email on your phone, and you can email us a message. You can also hit us up on social media. All right, up next, voter roll controversy in the Great Lakes state. Some say the rolls are overinflated, and that's true. The Secretary of State says there's a reason for that. Why she says that's the case, and a prominent Republican's reaction. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, diving into everything people, power, and politics. And we are talking about the controversy surrounding Michigan's voter rolls. Joining us today, Republican strategist Jason Cable-Rowe. And we thank you for being with us here today on The Pulse. All right, so let's set the table for everybody. Elon Musk and our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, have gotten into somewhat of a social media spat back and forth, where basically Elon Musk said Michigan has more registered voters than eligible citizens who can vote. Jocelyn Benson came out and said, look, we got 7.2 million active registered voters, 7.9 million citizens. So what's the difference? Why is there a difference here? The reason is because there's 600,000 plus people that have to be removed from the voter rolls. It's an inflated roll because of something that is essentially a law that's been put into place federally, that it's going to take time to remove some of these ineligible voters. What is the biggest problem you have with that situation?
Well, first, it opens up potential for fraud. I mean, we are one of the worst states in the entire country when it comes to ineligible voters on our voter rolls. So that'd be the first problem, and I can explain why that contributes to potentials for fraud very easily. It also drives up the cost of campaigns because candidates are sending out mail to registered and likely voters in their districts or in the state, and they are going off of a voter file. And so if there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of ineligible voters, that is money being spent to communicate to people that aren't going to be voting anyway. So it's a waste of money. It drives up the cost of campaigns. So, you know, you were talking about in the intro, you know, people getting sick of ads. Well, this is part of what contributes to that, is all the spending that goes in to try to reach all these voters.
So real quickly, though, because you say there's a possibility of fraud. No one so far has claimed any fraud because of the inflated rolls, but there is a concern that because you're saying there are people who aren't on the rolls, that their names are just sitting there, that there's a possibility. But you'd have to falsify a signature at an election place in order to commit that kind of fraud.
Are you saying people might break the law?
Well, I'm saying that there are consequences to breaking the law, and it's also, but it also is there a narrative out there that makes it seem like this is happening way more often than it is? Because falsifying a signature, when we check with the records with the state, it's very infrequent. And when it does happen, they hold news conferences. They talk about it. It happened in St. Clair Shores, where 4 people try to double vote.
It happens infrequently.
Yeah.
You know, I would say those moments that you're talking about happen infrequently. But I think this is, you know, where I find the bigger problem, and this is something we've been, you know, debating for years now. We have probably, I would say, 40% of Americans that do not trust the integrity of our election systems. And what we have told those people, and listen, some of them believe that because Donald Trump made them believe that. Some of them believe that from some personal experience that they had or their observations of the campaigns. But they do. It is not healthy for our democracy if we have 40% of our voters, 40% of our citizens
doubting the system,
doubting the integrity of the system. And what we have told those people is, you are conspiracy theorists and nuts, and shut up. And then, rather than addressing the concerns that they have, which would lower the temperature on this whole debate that we've been having now for 4 years, we could actually do some things that everybody agrees should be done, and we could alleviate that. One would be voter ID. I mean, it's the one thing that would fix a lot of the problems when it comes to people's confidence in the system.
But you should have a voter ID when you go to the polls.
We should, but it is not the law in Michigan, and Democrats have fought it. 80% of Michiganders support voter ID. I've seen this in multiple polls, including polls from organizations that don't support voter ID. We are told that we can't do voter ID because it's going to suppress the black vote, because somehow black people are uniquely incapable of getting photo IDs, and all the rest of us can't. But let me finish.
Go ahead.
So 58% of black voters support voter ID, but we still do not do it. In fact, we're making sure we never do it.
Let's stick back to this 606,000 people that on the voter roll. One second. You mentioned something, Jason. You said in order for 40% of the people to understand that they shouldn't be vilified for having questions, I agree with you. And this show, the ethos of the show, agrees with you. And so because of that, I actually had a conversation from my car in a parking lot on my way to work today with Secretary of State Benson, asking her the very honest question. You're not an insurrectionist or a conspiracy theorist because you have questions about the election. The question is, why are these 606,000 people on the voter rolls and they're inflated? Why is that? Here's what the Secretary of State told us.
Give us the reason why that is in the first place.
Sure. Well, I think, and we tried to make this case to the individual who wrote the article at Bridge. It can be complicated, and I understand that. The bottom line is we have 7.2 million active registered voters in the state of Michigan, and we have 7.9 million eligible citizens. So it's actually not true to say there are more active registered voters than there are people. And the reason why you see a voter registration database that has more records than active voter registration numbers is because once someone becomes ineligible, and we know they're ineligible, they pass away, for example, we're able to remove them right away. But when someone becomes potentially ineligible, like we receive a note that bounces back indicating they might have moved, we are not allowed under federal law to remove them immediately. We actually have to wait 2 federal election cycles before we can take that person off the list as a careful measure that the federal law has implemented to protect voters from state officials who would act too fast and remove someone who otherwise is eligible from the voter registration database.
All right, real quickly, in what could be the ultimate irony on Elon Musk's very platform X that he posted on, where he said that Michigan has more registered voters than eligible citizens, his own algorithm fact-checked him on his post and said that there are 606,000 inactive voters that will be removed by 2027. And the reason for that is because federal laws require officials to wait 2 federal elections before removal. That answer is not good enough for a lot of people, right?
Because it's not true. Federal law does not supersede state law when it comes to elections.
But election laws are federal.
No,
right?
they are not. They are absolutely not. In fact, I talked to the Missouri Secretary of State today, Jay Ashcroft, asking about what she is saying, and he said to me that there is no binding federal law that requires her to do what she's doing. And when you look around the 50 states, she is one of the only secretaries of state that are claiming this federal law prohibiting her from taking these people off. So I go back to what I say about people having questions. When they know, and she acknowledges that there's ineligible voters, but she's going to wait 3 years to remove them, just doesn't make sense to most normal people. And so just do the job. I mean, this is a woman who twice violated the law in the 2020 election. The courts came after the election and admonished her for doing that. This is a woman who fought like hell to get Cornel West off the ballot, and then a couple weeks later fought like hell to make sure that Robert Kennedy stays on the ballot. She's not acting in good faith. She's not being an objective administrator of the job of Secretary of State. She is a partisan, and she is doing things that help Democrat candidates over Republicans. But there is discretion,
and I understand what you're saying. There is discretion for the secretaries of state to actually look at the federal law, which does state that you should wait until 2 federal election cycles.
But it does not require.
But it doesn't require it. I understand that. There's discretion there. But let's talk about what happens in the places where they don't follow it. Indiana and Texas. There have been occasions now, on several occasions, where election officials use DMV records to identify non-citizens. Many of those non-citizens then became citizens, but there wasn't enough time for them to kind of catch up with that, and they were taken off the rolls very unfairly in a very undemocratic, un-American way. And so to wait 2 federal election officials before removal is to simply safeguard the rights for people to be able to vote. Is that not as important to those 40% of the people as the rest of it?
I'm not familiar with what happened in Texas and Indiana. I have no idea what provisional policies they have in place, like we do here in Michigan.
But isn't it important to have that time, though?
But if you show up in Michigan and you're not registered, you can fill out a provisional ballot. There are remedies to this. But you know, we can go find anything we want to justify not taking action. But when we have hundreds of thousands of ineligible voters on our rolls, when we have a high level of anxiety about the integrity of our process, why do we not just do the things that most common sense people would look at and say, well, yeah, if these people aren't eligible, why don't we remove them? What we have in Jocelyn Benson is a partisan liberal Secretary of State who is making excuses not to do the things that all the other states are doing.
I want to talk a little bit about, we talked to Secretary Benson a little bit about the issues that they're dealing with on that, and let's take a listen to what she said regarding what you're talking about.
Do you wish, as a local Secretary of State in the state of Michigan, that it could be quicker, maybe just 1 year or one cycle?
Sure. I mean, my job is to follow federal law. And so federal law has been well established to have those protections in place so that we don't wrongly move someone off the rolls who actually is eligible to vote. And to me, that is the most important thing. My job is to make sure every eligible citizen in Michigan, and only eligible citizens in Michigan, are able to vote. That's the priority. And so whatever we need to do to make sure our rolls enable that is priority number one.
Jason, I want to ask you one question. Do you think there are scenarios in place where if this election doesn't go Donald Trump's way, how much of a question will those 40% that you spoke of who don't have trust in the system, what does the spread have to be for them to believe, the 40% who doubt, that someone else could win?
There's a big difference, and I think people have missed it, and they missed it in 2022. There are so many eyeballs on this process now, from the parties to the candidates to the media to the election supervisors, that I think the controversies of 2020, which often involved poorly trained election administrators and poorly trained election observers, not understanding what was happening, this didn't used to be sexy, and 2020 at least made election day and the voting process a little sexier. And so I think we now have so many people involved in monitoring this across the board that I think we're going to avoid any controversies. There were none in 2022.
And by the way, there are polling challengers who obviously who want to go do that job. There are availabilities for that, so you should always look into that. Jason, thanks for being here for this honest and good conversation. We always appreciate your time. Next on the Pulse, we're getting you caught up on some of the stories you might have missed over the weekend, including why some Metro Detroiters are opting out of political signs. Next on the Pulse. This is Detroit's only nightly political talk show focusing on people, power, and politics. You know, we say it every week around this time. Political news never takes a weekend off, even though we do. So that's why we're here to get you up to speed with everything that happened over the weekend in case you missed it. And that includes a major escalation in tensions with the war in Israel, because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's vacation home was targeted in a drone strike. The drone did not hit his home, but his office is calling it an attempted assassination. That drone was one of more than 100 missiles launched from Lebanon into northern Israel over the weekend. Turning our attention, though, back to the U.S. presidential election, people in Metro Detroit are getting national attention because of what you're not seeing in their yards or on their cars. And it's actually following a trend we're seeing across the country. People are not putting up these political signs because they're worried about how their neighbors or people passing by will react.
Would never put a political sign up on my car or my house, ever. Never. Doesn't matter. Nope, never would do that. That is a level of bravery that I do not have.
Yeah, I notice a lot of people say, well, I'm not putting a sign out. Neighbors down the street will get mad. They'll do this and that. So what? You have a right to do what you want to do, as long as you're not hurting anybody in the process.
Somewhere in that spectrum lies these folks who are supporters, but they don't want to be public about it. They don't want to take the risk of somebody confronting them or tearing down their lawn sign or whatever might happen.
Again, we've talked about this before, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or right down the middle, everyone should feel safe, obviously, to express their political opinions. But it's also on all of us to make sure that those opinions are shared in a respectful and productive way, something we hope to promote on this show each and every night.